You're standing on the Mongolian steppe in January. The temperature is minus 45 degrees Celsius. Wind hits your face at 90 kilometers per hour. There are no trees, no hills, no caves. Just frozen grass stretching to the horizon in every direction. You have a family of 5 to keep alive. You have sheep that need to move to new pasture every few months. And you have one structure, a circular tent made of wool, felt, and wooden poles that fits on 3 horses. This is the Gers. For 3,000 years, it's kept Mongol families alive through winters that kill exposed skin in under 5 minutes. Every single winter. It weighs less than 250 kilograms fully packed. A family can assemble it in 90 minutes. And inside, with nothing but a small fire-burning dried animal dung, it stays around 15 degrees Celsius, while the air outside sits at minus 50 degrees Celsius. Modern expedition tents fail in these conditions. Permanent structures would trap families in place, and when pastures depleted, that meant starvation. The GR avoided both problems. This is careful engineering. Most contemporary architects couldn't replicate it if you paid them. The Mongolian steppe is cold in a way that makes Siberia look merciful. Winter temperatures drop to minus 40 degrees Celsius routinely. In northern Mongolia, minus 50 degrees Celsius happens often enough that nobody considers it extraordinary. But the cold alone wasn't what made this place a survival test. The wind never stops. The steppe is treeless, flat. There are no natural windbreaks across distances that span hundreds of kilometers. Winter winds average 60 to 90 kilometers per hour. Gusts exceed 100. At minus 40 degrees Celsius with 80 kilometers per hour wind, the effective temperature on exposed skin reaches minus 70 degrees Celsius. Frostbite happens in under 2 minutes. Hypothermia kills in under an hour without shelter. You can't survive outside. You can't build a fire that stays lit in that wind. And you can't stay in one place. Mongol survival depended entirely on livestock. Sheep, goats, horses, yaks. These animals needed fresh pasture year-round. Grass doesn't grow in winter, but it's preserved under snow, and animals dig through to eat it. When one area depletes, the herd moves. Families moved with them, 2 to 4 times per year minimum. In difficult years, 10 times or more. This created an engineering problem that had one acceptable solution: a shelter that could be disassembled completely, transported by horses or camels, reassembled quickly, and provide enough insulation to keep a family alive on minimal fuel through months of minus 40 degrees Celsius nights. Fixed structures didn't work. You can't move a permanent house. Heavier insulation didn't work because animals couldn't carry it. Tents without thermal mass didn't work because fire alone won't heat them in extreme wind. The GR emerged because the steppe allowed no compromise on any requirement. And there was one more constraint that made everything harder: fuel. Trees are rare on the open steppe. Wood exists in scattered forests in the north, but for most herding families, it was inaccessible during winter. The primary fuel source was argol, dried animal dung. Argol burns cooler than wood. It burns faster. You can't rely on massive roaring fires to brute force your way through winter. The shelter itself had to trap and hold heat passively, releasing it slowly even after fires died. The Mongols understood something that modern survival experts often miss. In extreme cold, insulation matters more than fire. Fire provides heat. Insulation keeps it. The GR was designed around that fact. The GR is a circle because circles don't fight wind. They redirect it. A square structure hit by 90 kilometers per hour gusts creates pressure points at every corner. Wind slams into flat walls, stalls, compresses, finds weak spots. Corners become fracture lines. Flat sides become sails. A circle has no corners. Wind strikes the curved wall and slides around the perimeter without stalling. No matter which direction the wind comes from, the structure deflects it evenly. On the steppe, where wind direction shifts constantly, this wasn't about aesthetics. It was survival geometry. The circle does something else too. It maximizes interior volume while minimizing exterior surface area. In thermal terms, the GER has less wall-losing heat relative to the space it encloses. Every square centimeter of felt costs warmth. The circular shape reduces how much felt you need to protect a given amount of living space. The Mongols didn't have thermodynamics textbooks. They had centuries of frozen families. The circle won because families using other shapes didn't make it. The GR's frame is wood, willow, birch, or pine depending on region. Not because it's abundant, because it's light and flexible. The walls are kana, expanding lattice sections that fold flat for transport and open into diamonds when erected. Each section is lashed together with leather cord, not nailed or rigidly joined. This flexibility is structural intelligence. Rigid joints snap under stress. Leather-lashed joints absorb shock. When wind hammers the GR, the lattice breathes, flexing slightly, redistributing force, then returning to shape. It moves with the wind instead of resisting until it breaks. A family might use 4, 5, 6, or 8 kana sections depending on size requirements. More sections mean larger diameter. The lattice expands or contracts. Same engineering principle, scalable implementation. The roof is 81 to 88 uni, thin poles that radiate from a central compression ring called the tuno. Each uni rests on the top edge of the lattice wall and slots into the outer rim of the tuno. The tuno is the engineering heart. It's a wooden wheel, usually 90 to 120 centimeters in diameter, that compresses all roof poles together at the apex. The inward angle of the uni creates a shallow dome. This dome sheds snow before accumulation becomes dangerous and distributes weight across the entire circular wall structure, not onto internal posts. No internal posts means no obstructions. Heat from the central stove circulates freely. The family has maximum usable floor space. Some traditional tunos can support the weight of an adult standing on them. The compression strength is that high. You're looking at a wheel holding 80+ poles in balanced tension while withstanding snow load and wind torque. And it's built without metal fasteners. The entire frame, kana, uni, tuno, assembles with pressure, friction, and leather cord. An experienced family erects it in under 2 hours. Disassembly takes half that. Speed mattered. Weather on the steppe shifts fast. A family needs to pack and move ahead of storms. If assembly required days or specialized labor, the GR would have failed as a nomadic solution. The frame is only half the structure, though. Without the next layer, it's scaffolding in the wind. Felt is what made the Gers survivable. Not canvas, not hide. Felt, a material so dense with trapped air that it could hold a 60-degree temperature difference between inside and out. Sheep were sheared in early summer when their wool was thickest. The fleece was cleaned, spread in layers on canvas, and soaked with hot water. Sometimes fermented mare's milk was used instead. The fats helped fibers bond. Then the canvas was rolled tight with the wool inside and dragged behind horses for hours. The constant agitation, moisture, and pressure caused the wool fibers to permanently interlock. No weaving, no stitching. The fibers tangled into a single continuous mat that couldn't be pulled apart. This is felt. What makes it work in -50 degrees Celsius is the air. Wool fibers are crimped and irregular. When they lock together, they create millions of microscopic pockets. Air gets trapped in those pockets and can't move. Dead air is one of the poorest conductors of heat that exists. One layer of traditional GR felt is 3 to 5 centimeters thick. That's enough to insulate a structure in moderate cold. Mongol winter isn't moderate, so families layered. Summer Gers used a single felt layer for shade and rain protection. In autumn, a second layer was added. By deep winter, 3 to 4 overlapping felt sheets covered the GR, creating insulation 10 to 15 centimeters thick in places. The layering wasn't uniform. Extra felt went on the northern side. Mongolian winter wind comes from the north. That's where heat loss was highest. The southern side, where the door faced, received thinner coverage because it caught brief solar gain during the day. The Mongols didn't have heat loss diagrams. They had cold families who learned where frost formed inside the GR. The felt strategy adjusted from there. Over the felt, a white canvas cover was lashed down. This outer shell, called the douari, did 3 things. It blocked wind from penetrating the felt. It shed rain and snow before moisture could soak into the wool. And it reflected summer sun, preventing the interior from overheating. The canvas was treated with animal fat or dairy products to waterproof it. This created a breathable but water-resistant barrier. Breathable mattered. If moisture couldn't escape, condensation from cooking and breathing would freeze inside the felt layers, destroying their insulating properties. So the system worked in layers. Canvas shell, 3 to 4 felts with trapped air between them. Then interior space. Inside a properly felted ger, with a small fire burning dried dung in the central stove. The temperature held at 15 to 20 degrees Celsius, while outside air sat at minus 40 degrees Celsius. More importantly, the felt released stored heat slowly. Fires couldn't burn all night. Fuel was too scarce. Families banked the stove before sleep, letting it smolder into coals. The felt held enough residual warmth that interior temperatures dropped only to 5 or 10 degrees Celsius by morning. Cold, but survivable under sheepskin blankets. Modern camping gear, synthetic insulation, double-wall tents, sleeping bags rated to minus 30 degrees Celsius, still struggles to match this performance in a portable package light, enough for 3 horses to carry. The Mongols weren't guessing. Felt making was communal knowledge passed through generations. Women knew exactly how thick each layer needed to be, where to double up coverage, when to add or remove layers as seasons changed. Children died if they got it wrong. The stove sat in the exact center of the GR because geometry determined survival. Heat radiates equally in all directions. If the stove sits off-center, one side stays warm while the other freezes. Families sleeping near the cold wall don't make it through winter. Center placement meant every wall received equal warmth. The distance from stove to felt was identical in all directions. No cold zones, no dead spaces where frost could creep in during the night. The stove itself was simple. An iron box with a door for fuel and a vertical pipe extending up through the tonneau. Traditional designs had no complexity, just thick metal that could withstand constant heating and cooling without warping. But the pipe route mattered. Straight vertical, no bends. This created maximum draft. Hot air rising through the pipe pulled fresh air in from below, feeding the fire and making even low-quality fuel burn hotter. In a place where fuel was dried dung that burned cooler than wood, draft efficiency separated adequate heat from slow freezing. The pipe also radiated warmth along its entire length before exiting through the crown. That column of hot metal became a secondary heat source. warming the upper air which then circulated downward along the felt walls. Natural convection did the rest. Hot air rose to the tonneau, spread across the domed ceiling, cooled slightly against the felt, and descended along the walls. This created a continuous circulation loop that distributed heat without fans, without electricity, without anything but physics. The Mongols didn't need to understand thermodynamics. They noticed that center-placed fires with vertical pipes kept families warmer than off-center fires with angled pipes. The design locked in. But heat was only half the problem. Fuel determined whether families survived or died before spring. Argol, dried dung from sheep, goats, horses, and yaks, was the primary fuel across most of the steppe. Fresh dung was collected year-round, spread in the sun and wind, and left to dry completely. Good argol was light, hard, and burned with steady low heat. Families needed hundreds of kilograms stockpiled before winter. Collection started in summer. Children and women gathered dung from grazing areas and stacked it near the Gers. By autumn, a winter's supply formed pyramids 2 meters high. Insufficient stockpiles meant cold nights, rationed fires, and frostbite. Argol burned differently than wood. Lower temperature, faster consumption. It couldn't produce the roaring fires that wood-burning stoves sustained for hours. This forced a different fire strategy. Mongol families didn't keep massive fires going constantly. They burned smaller, managed fires that maintained baseline warmth without exhausting fuel. The felt insulation did most of the work. The fire just topped up heat that the structure already held. At night, fires were banked. Coals were buried under ash to smolder slowly, releasing minimal heat through the dark hours. The felt's thermal mass carried the family through until morning, when the fire was rebuilt. This required judgment. Too much fuel wasted resources. Too little meant waking to frozen water buckets and dangerous cold. Families developed intuitive sense for how much argol to burn based on outside temperature, wind conditions, and felt layering. Supplemental fuels helped when available. Animal fat scraps burned hotter. Dried grasses added quick heat for cooking. Occasional wood, when families camped near northern forests, was saved for the coldest nights. But the system assumed argol as baseline. The Gers' entire heating design worked around the reality of low-temperature fuel. Then there was the ventilation problem. Smoke had to exit, carbon monoxide had to vent. But the tonneau opening that allowed this also bled heat directly into the sky. The solution was the urki, a felt flap attached to ropes that could be pulled partially or fully over the crown opening from outside. On calm, brutally cold days, the flap was drawn nearly closed. Just enough gap remained for smoke to escape. Heat loss dropped. On windy days, the flap opened wider. Wind created pressure differentials that could force smoke back down into the Gers if the opening was too restricted. Families adjusted the flap constantly based on conditions. This wasn't automatic. Someone had to go outside, assess wind and temperature, and pull the ropes to the correct position. Chucked to minus 40 degrees Celsius with high wind, this meant exposure. But it wasn't optional. Poor ventilation meant smoke inhalation or carbon monoxide poisoning. Both killed. The Gers also needed air exchange to prevent condensation. 6 people breathing in an enclosed space produced significant moisture. Cooking adds more. If that moisture couldn't escape, it condensed on the coldest surfaces, the felt near the walls, and froze into ice layers that destroyed insulation. Small gaps between the door and frame, plus the adjustable crown opening, provided controlled air exchange, enough to vent moisture and replenish oxygen. not enough to create interior drafts that stripped heat. Families learned to read condensation patterns. If frost formed on interior felt, ventilation was insufficient. If the air felt dry and stale, the crown was open too wide. The Ger didn't manage itself. It required constant adjustment. Inside, temperature wasn't uniform. The zone directly around the stove stayed warmest, 15 to 20 degrees Celsius in deep winter. This is where daytime activity happened: cooking, tool repair, children playing. The back section, farthest from the door, closest to the north wall where extra felt was layered, was the honored sleeping area. Elders and guests slept there. It was cooler than the stove zone, but warmer than anywhere else at night when fires died down. Near the door, temperatures dropped to near freezing. This is where supplies were stored and younger family members slept under thick sheepskin blankets. Cold, but survivable. Families didn't fight these gradients. They used them. Frozen meat stored near the door stayed preserved. Fermented mare's milk stayed cool. Items that needed warmth, newborn lambs, sick family members, were brought close to the stove. Sleeping platforms were raised or built on thick felt mats. The ground inside the Gr stayed frozen solid even in winter. Sleeping directly on it meant hypothermia. Insulation from below mattered as much as insulation from above. All of this, stove placement, fuel strategy, ventilation management, interior zoning, represented accumulated knowledge refined across generations. There were no manuals, no training courses. Children learned by watching parents adjust the key in response to wind shifts, by helping collect argil in summer, by noticing which parts of the Gr stayed warm and which turned cold. Mistakes were immediate. A poorly managed fire meant a freezing night. Inadequate fuel stockpiles meant suffering. Incorrect ventilation meant waking to smoke or dangerous condensation. The heating system wasn't technology you could buy. It was knowledge you inherited. And it worked. For 3,000 years, it kept families alive in conditions that kill modern adventurers with expensive gear. The Gr was part of something bigger. Site selection started in autumn. Families moved to winter camp, Otor, and where they set up could mean the difference between cold you could handle and cold that killed. They looked for valleys that blocked wind from the north, south-facing slopes that caught sun, frozen streams nearby where ice could be chopped for water, ground clear of avalanche paths if you were in the mountains. The door always faced south, not for ceremony, for heat. South-facing doors let in whatever winter sun they could get during the short daylight hours. Even weak sunlight coming through the entrance helped, and it meant the door turned away from the northern wind that came through all winter. Families camped near each other when they could, extended relatives within sight. The Gers acted as windbreaks for each other, and people could share resources when storms hit. But they kept space between structures, felt burns. In winter, when everything dried out, one fire could take the whole camp if the Gers sat too close. Inside, everything had a place. The back section held family heirlooms, religious items, and where the elders slept. Warmest spot, farthest from the door. The east side stored tools, saddles, weapons, the men's side by tradition. The west side held cooking gear and dairy equipment, the women's side. The area around the stove stayed open for movement and work. Children learned early not to walk between the stove and the support poles. It was safety and culture at the same time. Daily life followed a pattern. First person up, usually the women, got the fire going again right away. They melted frozen water, checked the livestock and fed them from stores kept near the Ger. Men cleared snow, tended animals farther out, gathered argil. Women handled dairy, cooked, kept the felt coverings in repair. Evening meant time around the stove, food, stories, making or fixing tools and clothes. The fire got built up before sleep, then carefully banked so it would burn low through the night. During blizzards, people stayed inside except to check critical animals. Sometimes young livestock got brought in to keep them from freezing. Families checked on their neighbors when the cold dragged on, shared fuel and food when someone ran low. Winter only worked because of what you did in summer and autumn. Making or repairing felt, collecting and drying argil, preserving meat, fattening animals. 60% of Mongolians still live in Gers today. The design hasn't changed. It solved the problem the first time.